Ladies and gentlemen, this is DVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. In this episode, we will be covering the dramatic situation in the Middle East. Now picture this, a war that's dragged on for 8 long months with countless lives lost and no end in sight. But wait, enters Joe Biden striding onto the stage with a peace plan in hand, ready to play the role of global peacemaker. Biden's 3-phase plan promises a 6-week ceasefire, a permanent cessation of hostilities, and the eventual reconstruction of Gaza. Sounds great on paper, right? Well, let's take a look at our latest report to shed some light on the issue.
U.S. President Joe Biden has taken the unusual step of publicly announcing a Gaza ceasefire proposal without prior consent from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. This bold move is seen as an attempt to nudge Netanyahu towards a deal that could end the ongoing conflict. The ceasefire proposal, a collaborative effort between Israel and the United States, was presented to Hamas, marking a significant shift in the usual diplomatic protocols between the close allies. The proposed ceasefire includes a 6-week truce, during which the Israeli military would withdraw from populated areas in Gaza. Concurrently, mediators would work towards negotiating a permanent cessation of hostilities. The leader of Hamas said, however, the group would demand a permanent end to the war in Gaza and Israeli withdrawal as part of the ceasefire plan, dealing an apparent blow to Biden's truce proposal told last week. Israel, meanwhile, said there would be no halt in fighting during ceasefire talks and launched a new assault on a central section of the Gaza Strip near the last city yet to be stormed by its tanks. Biden's framing of the proposal as an offer from Israel is designed to foster hope for a ceasefire and exert pressure on Netanyahu. Experts believe that this tactic is Biden's way of cornering Netanyahu into accepting the proposal. Despite this, an Israeli official has dismissed the notion that external pressure would compel Israel to against its national interests, emphasizing the focus should be on Hamas.
And has no regard whatsoever to Palestinian lives.
And now let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. So, let's look into the peace plan proposed by the Biden administration, starting with Phase 1, a full 6-week ceasefire. Israeli forces would withdraw from all populated areas of Gaza, while Hamas would release women, children, the elderly, and the sick among their hostages. In return, Israel would free hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, and humanitarian aid to Gaza would skyrocket. It's a solid start, but it hinges on both sides playing nice, and in this particular conflict, neither side has a good track record of that. Phase 2, a permanent end to hostilities mediated by international actors, with Hamas releasing the remaining hostages and Israel withdrawing completely. Finally, in Phase 3, Gaza would be rebuilt and Hamas would return the remains of hostages who perished. Simple, right? If only geopolitics were as easy as assembling IKEA furniture. Well, I wonder how the interested parties reacted to the proposal. In Tel Aviv, we have recently been witnessing the largest protests since the start of the conflict. Up to 100,000 people, including hostage families, urging the Israeli government to accept Biden's plan. The opposition, centrist politicians, and retired generals are mostly on board, but Benjamin Netanyahu? On one side, he faces a split in his right-wing coalition, with ministers threatening to walk if he agrees to the plan. On the other, he has a public and political opposition ready to pounce if he doesn't. Biden's plans hits its first obstacle. Israel's goals haven't changed. They aim to neutralize Hamas's military and administrative capabilities, free all hostages, and ensure Gaza is no longer a threat. A senior advisor to Netanyahu reiterated that a lasting ceasefire can only come after Israel achieves its war aims. American officials, meanwhile, are cautiously optimistic because Israel hasn't outright rejected Biden's plan. Hamas's reaction? Well, they view Biden's comments positively, but demand a complete Israeli withdrawal and a lasting ceasefire. The United States is pressing hard for this ceasefire, seeing it as crucial not just for peace, but for Biden's re-election hopes. The longer the conflict drags on, the more it alienates Biden's Arab American and left-wing supporters. In a rare show of unity, the US, Qatar, and Egypt issued a joint statement urging Israel and Hamas to accept the ceasefire proposal. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and other US officials are working overtime to make this happen. Biden's proposal is light on specifics, which leaves plenty of room for interpretation. How many hostages and prisoners will be exchanged? How long will phase 2 and 3 take? What happens if the initial ceasefire doesn't lead to a permanent truce? And Netanyahu underscored that Israel won't end the war in Gaza until its goals are met. Hamas, meanwhile, rejects any other authority in Gaza. With such entrenched positions, can Biden's plan succeed beyond the first phase? With both sides deeply distrustful and unwilling to compromise, it is unfortunately quite a long shot. And now here to shed more light on the issue is Łukasz Przyszewski, founder of the Abbasid Foundation Fund. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Good day. Thank you for having me.
So we are looking at the situation in the Middle East, which unsurprisingly is still in the bind. Now, recently, Biden has this peace proposal that, well, perhaps might be able to remedy the situation, but of course, it's looking a little less likely. Can you first help us understand what are these proposals and what are the interests on all three sides of the equation?
Well, the proposal basically is a ceasefire, but it's more like a proposal to force Israel to accept its own proposal, to be honest. So it's more like a one-sided deal, to be honest. But a ceasefire is a ceasefire, so at least the civilian population in Gaza could, take a deeper breath for a while. And well, from my perspective, this proposal isn't going to float for a longer while because, Israeli Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, Tsachi Hanegbi, said that the operation will last for at least next 7 months. So, from my perspective, the U.S., Biden, had to somehow come up with putting more pressure, but most commentators see that it's more like artificial, and we'll see if that will actually be later on, and maybe not enforced, but whether the current U.S. administration will put more pressure on the Israeli government. That's unlikely. Netanyahu will visit the U.S. on the 24th of July and address the U.S. Congress. But we can expect that this will be a speech in which he'll just outline why they are unable to implement a ceasefire. Well, the argument is pretty obvious, and it's actually true, because how can you have a ceasefire if you're constantly under attack? I mean, Hamas will not put down their weapons so easily. And Hamas also does not have full control over every and single member of its organization. So that's a pretty rational posture that the Israeli government now has. They cannot count on Hamas to obey to the agreement. So basically, why should they implement something that will actually not work, right?
Right, very good. Some very good point you brought up here. First of all, being a relatively one-sided deal that President Biden is now potentially trying to strong-arm Israel into signing. I would like to also draw our attention to what you just mentioned earlier, that Netanyahu is going to be in the U.S. on the 24th of July to address the Congress. Can you tell us what message does that send? Does that mean that the U.S. still actually significantly back Israel?
Yes, of course, the U.S. still significantly does back Israel. That's undisputable. So the message that will be put out there by Netanyahu will be plain, clear, and simple, that they are going to fight, and that most likely it's not the end of the fight, because we are hearing some rumors and also some opinions from some analysts that, Gaza is step 1, Hezbollah is step 2. So basically, it's just, most likely it's going to be a message that will show that Netanyahu is here and he's staying. So basically that he has to rule in order to solve the conflict with Hamas, and then perhaps even solve the conflict with Hezbollah. And that's, Also kind of like this, well, it's kind of like a political blackmail, yeah, because he can say that unless they finish off Gaza the way they want, they will have to go and enter into Lebanon earlier, yeah, for example, and that's not a thing that the U.S. wants because of the upcoming elections this autumn, right, presidential elections. So that will be the message that they are there. They will be still fighting in Gaza. And if you don't approve that and you put more pressure on us, then most likely we will have also to go sooner into Lebanon than later.
All right, and like you brought up also a very good perspective here when it comes to the upcoming U.S. presidential elections. Do you think that the current Biden administration's position in being like supportive of Israel, but meanwhile having a relatively tough rhetoric on it, is going to impact his voter base?
I think it could have an impact. It could have because, well, on the one hand, we see that rhetorically he is somehow, supporting a ceasefire, putting pressure on Israel, etc. But unless there will be anything tangible, anything to it, then most likely his voting base will be affected, and it might be that those voters who are more like, more empathic to this conflict, yeah, that they side more with the Palestinians, etc. Those people could simply not vote this year. That there is a likelihood like that, because if they will have to choose between Trump and Biden, they will just say that's both sides. That's two sides of the same coin, right? So why should they go? So the frequency may be lower.
And speaking of support for Israel, earlier on, we also see the attempt at bundling the support package for Ukraine and Israel together. And of course, that was blocked in the House of Representatives until the bill was split. And then in the voting, we see a significant difference when it comes to voting in support of Ukraine and Israel. So my question would be, if we talk about these conflicts in a vacuum all together instead of as separate issue, will that drive our attention apart when it comes to focusing on one, and maybe give the Russians some wiggle room when it comes to the war in Ukraine when the rhetoric is so unclear?
It does. It does give Russia some wiggle room, as you said, some flexibility. But the point is that from a strategic point of view, yeah, when we look at the globe as a whole, this is actually one front, yeah, because that's basically Hamas is an organization which is sponsored by Iran. Iran is Russia's informal ally, right? And Russia is fighting in Ukraine. So basically, that's one big front we have now in the Middle East, and it is tightly connected to Ukraine also because of the drone deliveries and things like that, yeah? But when it comes to the operational level, it's different. So that's why it was split. And Russia is definitely not going to benefit from this because it means that the message was simple. They put one package as a whole, yeah, and then they divided it. So the message to the Kremlin was simple. We see that it is one front, but from an operational perspective, it's not. So that's why we are splitting it to have a better adaptation, yeah, and adapting what should be in the package, in package 1 and package 2, gives us a higher degree of probability that the packages will be tailored more precisely to the needs on the ground. So basically that was good because the attention of the decision makers, lawmakers, wasn't put in an higher overly general level. Yeah, so that was needed. That was good, and I think that it doesn't necessarily mean that Russia will be able to use this room to wiggle and to be more flexible, because I see that they did try, but it didn't work out. So that was pretty smart.
All right. And when it comes to the U.S. presidential elections, we're also making some projection here. And just picturing scenarios if, for example, Donald Trump wins the presidency, do you think that the relation between him and Netanyahu would give him more breathing room to pursue his interest in the Gaza Strip? And do you think that maybe there's some strategy there to kind of draw this thing out until after the U.S. presidential election?
Definitely this will be dragged out later on, yeah? So if Trump would become the next U.S. president, I think this could give some flexibility, some breathing room to Netanyahu. But from a national from a national interest point of view, I think that Trump would simply put the same amount of pressure on Netanyahu as Biden did, just in a different way. So Biden has to do a lot of statements, rhetorically support some proposals and things like that. But that's not necessarily what Trump will do. For example, Trump could officially back Netanyahu more, yeah. But then in private conversations, he could be much more like, much more of a businessman, yeah. That we said what we said, but actually you should go and leave Gaza now, for example, yeah.
Right, that's actually quite an interesting situation that we might be able to see there. In the meanwhile, going back to that peace proposal, I'm also interested in the other Arab countries' perception towards it, namely countries like Qatar and Egypt. What do you think their perception to that is?
Their perception is simple. If the ceasefire will lead to a two-state solution, that's something they could see as potentially constructive and something that they could back. Because a simple ceasefire is, it's doable and it's easy. But no one wants to have an easy win here because of the large number of casualties on the Palestinian side, yeah? So they expect this to turn, or maybe not turn the key, but just to open the door to a two-state solution. And unless this happens, I think that those governments will not be satisfied with what happened, and that those governments like Egypt and Saudi Arabia will just continue to get more cozy with Iran, because Iran won a lot of political capital in the region, and that's why those countries also have to follow this trend in order to stay on the right side of the wall from their perspective.
Right. So it does seem like the situation is still caught in a bind, and the purpose or the chances of peace might still be a little bit far away. Thank you so much for all your input and insight, and thanks again for being with us on Eastern Express. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. The Ukrainian military is undergoing structural changes aimed at increasing operational efficiency. Now, this strategic shift comes at a critical juncture as Ukraine continues to fortify its positions against ongoing aggression.
The restructuring plan includes a focus on integration of advanced technologies and improved troops rotations, reflecting the militia's commitment to adapting to evolving dynamics of modern warfare. Ukrainian command emphasizes that these changes are essential for maintaining a robust defense system capable of responding swiftly and effectively by threats. The announcement has been met with cautious optimism, as it promises to address some of the pressing challenges faced by the Ukrainian forces, such as manpower shortages and the need for enhanced coordination among units. The move also aligns with the government's broader objectives of military reform and self-reliance. As Ukrainian defense lines are being tested, the success of these structural changes will be a key factor in the nation's ability to sustain its defense efforts and secure its sovereignty.
Russian authorities have detained a French national under the suspicion of collecting sensitive military information. The suspect, an advisor for the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue's Russia and Eurasia program, has been accused of failing to register as a foreign agent and gathering intelligence that could threaten Russian state security.
The arrest of Laurent Vantier was confirmed by French President Emmanuel Macron, who denied an official ties between the suspect and the French government. The Center for Humanitarian Dialogue is actively seeking his release and has stated that they are working to understand the circumstances leading to his detention. Russia's investigative committee alleges that he had been purposefully collecting military and technical information over several years. This information, according to Russian officials, could be detrimental to the nation's security if acquired by foreign entities. The committee also claims that he repeatedly visited Russia, including Moscow, to meet with Russian citizens as part of his intelligence gathering activities. The French Foreign Ministry has yet to comment on the situation. However, President Macron has assured that the Frenchman will receive full consular protection. If convicted, he faces up to 5 years in prison, a serious charge amid the ongoing conflict in Ukraine and heightened scrutiny of foreign nationals in Russia.
Bulgaria has commenced the construction of the Vertical Corridor gas pipeline initiative. Now, this project, spearheaded by a Bulgarian gas operator, was officially launched on June 6, 2024, marking a pivotal step towards reducing southeastern Europe's reliance on Russian gas transit routes.
The Vertical Corridor is a network of gas pipelines designed to provide an alternative pathway for shipping gas from Greece through Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia, Moldova, and Ukraine, as well as facilitating reverse flows through EU natural gas and liquefied natural gas systems. This strategic infrastructure is expected to play a crucial role ahead of anticipated suspension of Russian gas transit through Ukraine at the end of the year. The initiative is not only a testament to Bulgaria's commitment to energy independence, but also reflects the collective efforts of the European Union to secure a stable and diverse energy supply. The construction signals the beginning of a new era in the European gas market, one that promises greater flexibility and resilience against potential supply disruptions.
Russian media outlets have been actively engaged in a propaganda campaign against the Baltic states' energy policies. A study by Mediaskopas, which analyzed 3,760 reports from Russian news websites between January 2021 and April 2024, identified 5 main narratives that have been consistently developed over the last 3 years.
The narratives pushed by the Russian media suggest that the Baltic countries are responsible for the surge in electricity and gas prices in 2022. This is attributed to their decision to withdraw from Russia's sphere of influence and synchronize their electricity grids with Western Europe. Additionally, the Kremlin is reportedly attempting to undermine confidence in the Baltic states' green energy initiatives, claiming that such measures will not save them. Additionally, Baltic politicians are portrayed as implementing Washington's agenda, with the intent to impoverish their citizens and ruin businesses. This image is contrasted with that of Russia, which is depicted as a wealthy and generous nation that has benefited from Western sanctions against it.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to DVP World.